Everyone in the town square turned to look when the slap echoed through the open air. It wasn't just the sound, it was the silence that followed. A girl stood at the center of the sidewalk, her cheek red, eyes wide, and backpack barely clinging to her shoulder. In front of her, 3 students in matching Letterman jackets stood laughing, their expressions twisted with arrogance. Her name was Maya. 16, quiet, polite, the kind of girl who teachers loved and classmates ignored. She wasn't unpopular, just invisible. The kind of invisible that makes people think they can say anything, do anything, and walk away without consequences. But that day, on that street, in front of that crowd, something inside Maya changed. The slap came from Brooke, the so-called queen bee of Riverside High. Brooke wasn't alone, of course. Her ever-present shadows, Lena and Kayla, flanked her, arms crossed like bodyguards. "You think you're better than me?" Brooke spat. "With your perfect grades, your little books. Walking around like you're too good to talk to anyone." Maya didn't respond. Not with words. She just stood there, frozen, surrounded by strangers who all witnessed her humiliation. Phones were out. Some people gasped. Others just watched. That's how it goes, doesn't it? Spectators everywhere. Helpers nowhere. This wasn't the first time Brooke had bullied her. It had been going on for months. It started with whispers, grew into social sabotage, and then escalated into physical confrontations. Maya had told the teachers, told the counselor, even tried to tell her parents, but nothing ever changed. Brooke's parents were donors to the school. Her charm worked on adults. Her cruelty lived in shadows. But this time it wasn't in the shadows. This time it was public. This time people watched. And that made all the difference. Maya took one shaky step back. She could hear her heart pounding louder than the laughter around her. But then something flicked inside, something sharp. She straightened her spine. She placed her backpack on the ground. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't make a scene. Instead, she looked Brooke directly in the eyes and said, calmly, "You're going to regret that." The crowd reacted, some with gasps, others with skeptical chuckles. Brooke raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? What are you going to do about it, bookworm?" What Maya did, no one expected. She stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and in a swift, practiced move, grabbed Brooke's wrist just as she went in for another hit. With precision that spoke of training, not impulse, she twisted Brooke's arm behind her back and brought her down to her knees. Maya didn't scream. She didn't rage. She just held her steady and whispered, "This ends now." Lena lunged forward, but Maya stepped back, releasing Brooke. "Don't," she said, firmly. "I've trained long enough. I'm done being your target." The silence that followed was even heavier than before. Brooke didn't get up. Her friends didn't say a word. A police officer from across the street, who had witnessed everything, walked over, not to arrest Maya, but to check on her. The video, of course, went viral. By nightfall, Maya's name was trending. Not because she attacked someone, but because she stood up with dignity. Because she defended herself without violence beyond what was necessary. Because the quiet girl who was always overlooked had finally spoken, and not with words, but with strength. What people didn't know was that Maya had been taking Krav Maga classes every weekend with her cousin. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she was tired of being afraid. She learned control. She learned balance. And most importantly, she learned that fear ends the moment you refuse to surrender. The school tried to spin the story, at first. But too many witnesses had seen the slap. Too many voices, students, parents, strangers, called out for justice. Brooke and her friends were suspended indefinitely. Maya, meanwhile, was asked to speak at an anti-bullying event hosted by the school board. At first, she didn't want to. She didn't like crowds. She didn't like attention. But then she remembered the girl she was, the one who used to cry in silence and walk with her head down. And she thought of the other kids out there, just like her, waiting for someone to go first. So she spoke. Softly. Truthfully. She talked about fear. About loneliness. About how people can break your spirit not with fists but with silence and exclusion. She talked about strength, not the kind that comes from violence, but the kind that comes from knowing your worth even when others don't. Her words didn't fix everything overnight. But they planted seeds. The school became more active. Teachers were trained. Students were encouraged to report abuse. And most importantly, more students began to stand beside one another. Not just in fights, but in friendship. As for Maya, she never became loud or flashy. But she never looked down again. She walked those same halls with her head high, not because people feared her, but because they respected her. Sometimes, it takes one moment to redefine who you are. One moment where you refuse to let the world tell your story for you. And for Maya, that moment came after a slap. A public one. A humiliating one. But it turned out to be the biggest mistake the bullies ever made. Because that was the day the quiet girl stood up, and never sat down again.